Sebastian, that woman looks exactly like your missing mother, Isadora shouted, pointing to the homeless woman. The millionaire was paralyzed. What they discovered next changed their lives forever. Time stood still when Sebastian Montemayor heard those words come out of Isadora's mouth. For 35 years, he had lived with the deepest emptiness a man can experience, the inexplicable absence of his mother. Elena Montemayor had disappeared one April morning when he was only 8 years old, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a broken child's heart that had never fully healed. "What did you say?" Sebastian whispered, his voice barely audible, as his eyes slowly turned toward where Isadora was pointing. There, sitting on the sidewalk in front of the cathedral, was a woman about 60 years old. Her clothes were worn but clean, her gray hair tied back in a simple braid that hung over her right shoulder. But what made Sebastian's heart stop was not her general appearance, but her features. The same green eyes he had inherited from his mother, the same delicate line of her jaw, even the particular way her hands rested on her lap. "Sebastian," Isadora whispered, taking his arm firmly. "Do you see what I see?" The most successful businessman in town had become a lost child in a matter of seconds. His legs trembled and he had to lean against the wall of the nearest building to keep from fall. 27 years of fruitless searching, of hiring private detectives, of following false leads that led him to dead ends. And now was it possible that the answer had been so close all along? "It can't be," he muttered, shaking his head. "It's impossible. My mother would never. She would never have." But even as he uttered those words, something deep inside him screamed that it was possible. That after all this time, searching in the wrong places, life had decided to put her right in front of him at the least expected moment. The woman looked up at that moment as if she had felt the weight of his words. Her green eyes met Sebastian's directly, and it was as if a bolt of lightning had shot through the space between them. For a moment that felt like an eternity, mother and son looked at each other without recognizing each other, but with an inexplicable connection that made the air itself seem electrified. "My God," whispered the woman, bringing a trembling hand to her heart. Those eyes. Sebastian took a step forward, then another, as if he were a sleepwalker following a dream. Isadora walked beside him, her own breathing ragged with the tension of the moment. When they were close enough, Sebastian could see every detail of the woman's face, every line that time had drawn on her skin, every mark that spoke of years of experiences he knew nothing about. "Excuse me," he finally managed to say, his voice breaking on the first word. "What's your name?" The woman studied him intently as if trying to solve an impossible puzzle. Her eyes moved from his face to his hands. Then they returned to his eyes, and Sebastian could see something changing in her expression, a recognition that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. "Milagros," she replied softly. "My name is Milagros." The name hit Sebastian like a slap. His mother's name was Elena, not Milagros, but the physical resemblance was so overwhelming that it couldn't be coincidence. Had she changed her name? Why would anyone do such a thing? "Milagros," he repeated, as if by saying the name he could better understand the situation. "May I ask, do you have any family?" The woman's eyes filled with tears instantly, and Sebastian felt as if someone had stabbed him in the heart. It was the same expression of pain he had seen in the few photographs he had kept of his mother. That deep sadness that seemed to come from having lost something irreplaceable. "I had a son," Milagros whispered, her voice barely audible. "A long time ago, he was my whole world." Sebastian felt his legs buckle and Isadora held him by the arm, her own eyes filled with tears as she witnessed what could be the most important reunion of her boyfriend's life. "What happened to your son?" Isadora asked gently when Sebastian couldn't find the words. Milagros closed her eyes as if the question caused her physical pain. "I lost him. I lost everything. My family, my home, my identity. Everything vanished in a single night." "How?" Sebastian managed to whisper. Although he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer, the woman looked him straight in the eyes, and for a moment Sebastian could see beyond time and circumstances. He could see the mother he had loved with all his heart as a child, the woman who sang him lullabies and told him stories before bedtime. My husband began to sob, his voice breaking. He told me that if I ever tried to contact my son again, He would make sure we both suffered terrible consequences. He said it was better for my boy to grow up thinking he was dead than to know he had a mother who couldn't protect him. Sebastian's world collapsed completely at that moment. His father, his own father, had been responsible for his mother's disappearance. The man he had raised as a devoted widower who had mourned the death of his wife for years had been the architect of the most painful separation of his life. What was his son's name? Isidore asked. Although, from the expression on Sebastian's face, both women already knew the answer. Sebastian, he whispered miracles, and as he uttered that name, something broke inside him. His name was Sebastian, and he had the most beautiful eyes in the world. Eyes just like yours, young man. The silence that followed was absolute. The noises of the city seemed to have vanished, leaving only the sound of three hearts beating in unison. Sebastian extended a trembling hand towards Milagros, who took it instinctively, and the moment their skin touched, they both knew with absolute certainty what had happened. "Mom," Sebastian whispered, the word coming out of his mouth like a prayer he had been holding back for 27 years. Milagros brought both hands to her face, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. "My child," I sob, "my little Sebastian." Isadora watched the scene with a broken heart, witnessing the most profoundly emotional moment she had ever witnessed. But she also knew that this was only the beginning. There were so many questions to answer, so much pain to heal, so many lost years that somehow needed to be recovered. "What are we going to do now?" she murmured, more to herself than to the other two. Sebastian didn't take his eyes off his mother, as if afraid that if he blinked, she would disappear again. "Let's go home," he said finally, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face. "We're going to go home, and you're going to tell me everything. Every day of these 27 years, every moment we lost." Milagros nodded, unable to speak, as Sebastian helped her to her feet. She was more fragile than she had imagined, and she realized that the years had been hard on her. But she was alive. She was here, and that was all that mattered at that moment. As they walked slowly toward Sebastian's car, Isadora couldn't help but wonder what other truths would come to light. If Sebastian's father had been capable of something as cruel as separating a mother from her son, what other secrets had he been keeping? And how would he react when he discovered that his carefully constructed lie had finally been exposed? The reunion was only the first step in a journey that would forever change the lives of everyone involved. The car ride to Sebastian's mansion was filled with an emotional silence that none of the three knew how to express. Miracles. She sat in the back seat, her eyes fixed on the back of her son's head, as if she feared that if she stopped looking at him, this whole experience would turn out to be just a cruel dream. Her hands trembled slightly as she stroked the soft upholstery of the vehicle, a world so different from the one she had known for the past 27 years. Isadora was driving because Sebastian had admitted that he didn't feel capable of concentrating on the traffic. His mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, overwhelming joy at having found his mother, deep anger towards his father, and overwhelming confusion about what to do with all this information. Every time she looked in the rearview mirror and saw Milagros's face, she felt as if she were living in an alternate reality. "How have you been living all these years?" Sebastian finally asked, breaking the silence that had lasted 15 minutes. Milagros closed her eyes as if preparing to relive decades of pain. "The first years were the hardest." She began in a soft voice. "Your father told me that if I ever tried to find you, he would have you hurt. He said he had contacts everywhere, that he would always know if I tried to get close to you." Sebastian felt anger rising in his chest like an uncontrolled fire. How could he threaten you like that? How could he separate us? Because he found out something I had been hiding. "Milagros," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Something he considered an unforgivable betrayal. Isadora exchanged a worried glance with Sebastian through the mirror. There were more secrets, more layers of pain that had not yet been revealed. "What did he find out?" Sebastian asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Milagros remained silent for several minutes, struggling internally with a truth she had kept hidden for decades. Finally, her voice breaking, she whispered, "He found out that I was helping my sister and her children financially. They were living in extreme poverty, and I had been sending them money in secret for years." Sebastian frowned in confusion. That was the great crime, helping your family. Your father had an obsession with absolute control, Milagros explained. Tears began to roll down his cheeks. When he married me, he made it very clear that I had to cut all ties with my family of origin. He said they weren't worthy, that they would contaminate our social status. But when my sister called me desperate because her children had nothing to eat, I couldn't just ignore her. He said they weren't worthy, that they would contaminate our social status. But when my sister called me in desperation because her children had nothing to eat, I couldn't just ignore her. The image Sebastian had had of his father throughout his life began to crumble piece by piece. The man I remembered as a devoted and loving widower was revealed to be a controlling tyrant who had destroyed lives on a whim. So when he discovered the money transfers, it was nothing short of a miracle. He flew into a terrible rage. He accused me of stealing from him, of betraying him, of being a manipulative liar. That night, when you were sleeping, he gave me an ultimatum. Either I disappeared from our lives forever, or he would make sure that both you and I suffered the consequences. What kind of consequences? Isadora asked, although the tone of her voice seemed to fear the answer. He threatened to accuse me of domestic abandonment and theft. He said he had lawyers who would fabricate evidence that would make me look like an unfit and criminal mother. But the worst part, Milagros paused, her breathing ragged. The worst part was when he told me that if I didn't disappear voluntarily, he would make sure you were sent to a military boarding school where you would never see me again and where he would tell you terrible stories about me until you hated me. The silence that followed was so heavy that it seemed to have a physical presence in the car. Sebastian realized that he was holding his breath, and when he finally exhaled, it was with a sound that was half a tom, half an angry growl. "So you left," he muttered, more like a statement than a question. "I thought it was the only way to protect you." Milagros sobbed openly. "Now I thought that if I left quietly, at least you could grow up in a safe environment, even if that meant growing up without me. I never imagined he would tell you that he had died." Isadora stopped the car at the traffic light and turned to look at Milagros directly. "But why did you never try to contact him when he grew up, when he became an adult?" Milagros looked up, her eyes reflecting years of pain and regret. "I tried. When Sebastian turned 18, I went looking for him. But by then, your father had built such a convincing story about my death that when I approached the university where you were studying, they kicked me out like I was some crazy woman harassing the students. Sebastian felt as if someone had punched him in the stomach. Were you at my university? I had been watching you from afar for weeks," Milagros admitted. "I saw you walking around campus, laughing with your friends, studying in the library. You were so beautiful, so intelligent, so full of life. But when I finally gathered the courage to approach you, the security guards intercepted me. Apparently, your father had alerted the university about a mentally unstable woman who might try to pass herself off as your deceased mother." Tears streamed freely down Sebastian's face. For years, he had felt a strange feeling of emptiness at college, as if something important was missing from her life. Now she realized that her mother had been there so close that they had probably shared the same air. But her father's manipulations had made a reunion impossible. "And after that?" Isadora asked gently. "After that, I gave up. After that, I gave up. Milagros," he admitted shamefully, "I thought maybe your father was right. Maybe it was better to let you live your life without the complication of a mother who had returned from the dead. So I walked away and tried to build a new life." "But what happened? How did you end up?" Sebastian couldn't finish the sentence, but everyone knew what he was asking. Milagros sighed deeply. "The first few years I managed to keep my head above water working in family homes, cleaning offices, any job I could get without references. But when I turned 50, it became harder to find work. Employers preferred younger people, and then I hurt my back in a work accident, and the medical bills consumed all my savings." Sebastian closed his eyes, imagining his mother struggling alone against the world. While he lived in the comfort his father had provided him with money that had probably been earned at the expense of others' suffering. But the worst part wasn't the financial situation. It continued to be miraculous. The worst part was the loneliness, spending Christmas alone, birthdays alone, having no one in the world who really knew me. I had lost not only my son, but my entire identity. Elena Montemayor had died officially, and Milagros was just a woman with no history, no family, no purpose. The car had arrived at Sebastian's mansion, but none of the three made any move to get out. The conversation was too important, too cathartic to be interrupted. Mom Sebastian said the word with reverence, as if he were rediscovering its meaning. I want you to know that I forgive you completely. I understand why you did what you did, but I also want you to know that you will never, ever be alone again. You will never have to worry about money, a roof over your head, food, anything. Milagros began to cry again, but this time they were tears of relief mixed with such intense joy that it seemed painful. And is there anything else you need to know? Sebastian continued holding Isadora's hand. This incredible woman standing next to me, Isadora, is going to be your daughter-in-law, and she already loves you because she can see how special you are. Isadora blushed through her own tears. Mrs. Elena, I'm sorry. Milagros, it has been an honor to meet you today, and I want you to know that we will take care of her as she deserves. Milagros looked at her son, then at Isadora, and for the first time in 27 years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her life could have a happy ending after all. But now, Sebastian said, his voice taking on a more serious tone, we need to talk about my father because what he did cannot go unpunished. The expression on Milagros's face changed, and Sebastian could see real fear in her eyes. Sebastian, she whispered, your father is still a very powerful man. If he finds out that you found me, if he finds out that you know the truth, what will he do? Sebastian replied with iron determination. I'm a grown man, successful, independent. He can't control me like he controlled an 8-year-old boy anymore. But even as he said the words, a part of him wondered what other unpleasant surprises the past might have in store for him. If his father had been capable of something as cruel as separating a mother from her son, what other dark secrets had he been hiding all these years? The answer to that question would come sooner than any of them imagined. Sebastian's mansion had been transformed into a refuge of intense emotions. For the next 3 hours, the three remained in the elegant living room where Milagros shared more details of her lost life, while Sebastian struggled to process the magnitude of the lies that had defined her existence. Isadora had made tea and discreetly called her assistant to cancel all of Sebastian's appointments for the next day, knowing instinctively that this healing process could not be interrupted. I want to show you something, Milagros said suddenly, pulling from her worn handbag a small metal box that had seen better days. With trembling hands, she opened it to reveal a treasure trove of memories, faded photographs, a letter written in Sebastian's childish handwriting, and a small drawing he had made for Mother's Day when he was 7 years old. You kept all this for 27 years? Sebastian asked, his voice breaking with emotion as he took the drawing. It was a simple image of two figures holding hands under a yellow sun with the words, "To the best mom in the world," written in red crayon. It was the only thing I had left of you, she replied. Miracles wiping away her tears. In the worst moments, when I felt like I couldn't go on, I would open this box and remember that somewhere in the world I had a son who had been my reason for living. Isadora watched the scene with a broken heart, but also with growing concern. She had noticed that Sebastian alternated between moments of absolute tenderness with his mother and periods of tense silence where she could see the anger burning in his eyes. She knew her boyfriend well enough to know that he was planning something, and she feared that this confrontation with his father would not be as simple as he seemed to believe. Sebastian, he said softly, I know what you're thinking, and I think we should talk about it before you do something irreversible. Irreversible. Sebastian stood up abruptly, beginning to pace the room like a caged animal. You know what was irreversible? The 27 years I lost with my mother, the Christmases I spent feeling an inexplicable emptiness, the times I needed a mother's advice and had no one to turn to. That was irreversible. His voice had risen to almost a shout, and Milagros shrunk slightly on the sofa. Immediately, Sebastian realized his mistake and approached her, taking her hands in his. I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't mean to scare you. I just need him to know what he did. I need him to face the consequences of his actions. Milagros looked at her son with a mixture of love and terror. Sebastian, my love, I understand your anger. Believe me, I've felt that rage for years. But your father isn't just a cruel man. He's a cruel man with unlimited resources and connections in places we can't even imagine. What do you mean? Asked Isadora, approaching them. Milagros hesitated as if she were debating internally how much more pain she could inflict in a single day. Finally, with a deep sigh, she continued, "Your father didn't build his business empire with just hard work and smart decisions. During the years we were married, I overheard phone conversations I shouldn't have heard. I saw documents I shouldn't have seen." The air in the room grew thick with tension. Sebastian sat up slowly, sensing that he was about to discover another layer of unpleasant truths. "What kind of documents?" he asked hoarsely. "Contracts with government officials, payments to judges, threats to competitors who were becoming too successful." Milagros closed her eyes, as if the mere act of remembering caused her physical pain. "Your father has a complete file of compromising information on dozens of powerful people in this city, and they have information on him. It's a network of mutual assured destruction." Isadora felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you saying he's part of some kind of conspiracy?" "I'm saying he's part of a system where justice is bought and sold like any other commodity," Milagros replied. "And when I found out too much, I became a security risk." Sebastian stood up again, but this time his movement was more controlled, more calculated. "So he didn't just separate me from you for personal control, he also did it because you knew too much about his illegal activities." "Exactly. And that's why I'm so scared now," Milagros admitted. "If he finds out that I'm alive, that I'm talking to you, he won't just try to separate us again. He'll try to silence me forever." The silence that followed was disturbing. Isadora approached Sebastian and took his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles like steel cables. "But there's something he doesn't know," Sebastian said slowly, a dangerous smile appearing on his lips. "Something that could completely shift the balance of power." "What?" both women asked in unison. "Over the last 5 years, my company has grown to rival his. I have my own contacts, my own influence, my own resources. I'm no longer the helpless child he could manipulate at will." Milagros shook her head vigorously. "Sebastian, you don't understand. It's not just about money or influence. Your father has allies who don't play by the normal rules of business. So maybe it's time for me to stop playing by the normal rules too," Sebastian replied, his voice taking on a tone that Isadora had never heard before. At that moment, Sebastian's phone began to ring. He looked at the screen and his face turned pale instantly. "Who is it?" asked Isadora. "My father," Sebastian whispered. The irony of the moment did not go unnoticed by anyone present. "Don't answer it," she pleaded, panic evident in her voice. But Sebastian had already made his decision. He slid his finger across the screen and put the phone on speaker. "Hello, Dad, it's Sebastian." The voice of Rodrigo Montemayor filled the room, and Milagros visibly cringed at hearing it after so many years. "I have interesting news for you. It seems that a very confused woman has been in the city center telling people that she is Elena Montemayor." Sebastian's heart stopped. His father already knew. "Really?" he managed to reply, trying to keep his voice neutral. "That sounds strange." "Very strange," agreed Rodrigo. But there was a dangerous quality to his tone, especially considering that my beloved Elena died more than 2 decades ago. "I wonder what kind of sick person would impersonate a deceased woman to take advantage of a grieving family." Milagros brought both hands to her mouth, her eyes filled with terror. Isadora instinctively moved closer to her, offering silent support. "I guess there are some very desperate people in the world," Sebastian replied, deciding to play along for the moment. "Oh, definitely. But here's the interesting part," Rodrigo continued. "This woman was seen getting into a car very similar to yours, a black Tesla, last year's model. What a coincidence, don't you think?" The trap was closing, and everyone in the room could feel it. Sebastian looked at his mother, who was trembling with fear, then at Isadora, who nodded slightly, giving him silent encouragement to do what he felt was right. "Dad," Seb said, taking a deep breath, "I think it's time we had a very serious conversation." The pause on the other end of the line was long and heavy with meaning. "A serious conversation about what exactly?" Rodrigo asked, his voice now devoid of any pretense of paternal warmth. "About Elena Montemayor." About my mother, about the lies you've been telling me for 27 years. Another longer pause this time. Sebastian Rodrigo's voice had turned icy. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. This woman, whoever she is a con artist who is trying to take advantage of our family pain. She's manipulating you. No, Sebastian replied firmly. The only one who has been manipulating me for my entire life is you. Come home now. We need to talk face to face. No, if you want to talk, you come here, and you come alone. Silence stretched on for what seemed like minutes. Finally, Rodrigo spoke, and there was a quality to his voice that made the hairs on everyone's arms stand on end. Sebastian, for your own sake, I hope you reconsider this decision. There are forces at play that are beyond your understanding. Don't become an obstacle that needs to be removed. The threat was clear and undeniable. Milagros began to sob silently, vividly remembering the kind of man who had terrorized her life decades ago. Are you threatening me? Asked Sebastian, his own voice taking on a dangerous edge. I'm warning you as a father who loves you. A father who loves me wouldn't have spent 27 years lying to me about my mother's death. Your mother is dead, Rodrigo shouted, finally losing his composure. The woman you think she is an imposter, a con artist, a threat to everything we've built. Then come and prove it, Sebastian challenged. Come here and look her in the eyes and tell me she's not Elena Montemayor. The line went dead abruptly. In the silence that followed, the three remained motionless, processing what had just happened. Sebastian had crossed a line from which there was no return. The war between father and son had officially begun. What have we done? Murmured Milagros. The right thing, replied Sebastian, although in the back of his mind a small voice wondered if he had seriously underestimated the power and cruelty of his father. Isadora approached the window and looked out onto the street. I think we should get ready for visitors, she said softly, because I have a feeling that your father isn't coming alone, and he's not coming alone to talk. The fate of the Montemayor family would be decided in the next few hours, and everyone knew that when the dust settled, nothing would ever be the same again. The same. The next 40 minutes passed in almost unbearable tension. Sebastian had closed all the curtains in the mansion and had called his personal assistant to cancel any appointments for the rest of the week, while Isadora helped Milagros calm down by preparing her a herbal tea. The house, which that morning had been a haven of tranquility, now felt charged with expectation and nervousness. Maybe we should meet somewhere neutral place, Milagros murmured for the 10th time, her hands trembling as she held the cup. A restaurant, a cafe, somewhere public where he can't make a scene. No, Sebastian replied firmly, adjusting the curtains so he could see the street without being seen. If we're going to do this, we'll do it on our terms, at my house where you feel safe. Isadora approached him, noticing the tension in his shoulders. During the 2 years they had been together, she had seen Sebastian face business crises, ruthless competitors, and high-stress situations, but she had never seen him as upset as he was now. It wasn't just anger she saw in his eyes. It was something deeper, more vulnerable. It was the pain of a child who had been betrayed by the person he trusted most in the world. Are you sure we're doing the right thing? She asked him quietly so that Miracles couldn't hear. Your mother is right to be nervous. This confrontation could be very painful for everyone. Then it's even more important that someone find out the truth, Sebastian replied. His voice was filled with determination. Do you know how many lies I've been living? How many decisions I've made based on false information he gave me? At that moment, the security cameras detected movement at the main entrance. Sebastian looked at the screen and felt his stomach tighten. His father had arrived, but he wasn't alone. There were 3 black cars parking in front of the mansion, and several elegantly dressed people got out whom Sebastian recognized as lawyers and advisors from the family business. Of course, Sebastian muttered. He came with his entire legal team. Milagros approached the window and, seeing the professionals gathering at the entrance, her face turned pale. I recognize some of them, she whispered. They worked for your father years ago. They're the lawyers he uses when he needs someone to disappear legally. Disappear legally, Isadora repeated, confused. Confidentiality agreements, non-disclosure agreements, intimidating lawsuits. Milagros explained, "Your father is an expert at using the legal system to silence people who know too much." The doorbell rang long and formal, followed by several decisive knocks on the front door. Rodrigo Montemayor's voice echoed from outside, amplified by the marble entrance. "Sebastian, I know you are there, and I know you have that woman with you. We need to talk immediately about this situation before it gets out of hand." Sebastian activated the property's intercom system. "Dad, if you want to talk, you can do so from there. You don't need a whole legal team for a family conversation." The laughter that followed was cold and calculated. "Do you seriously think this is just a family conversation? Sebastian, this woman poses a significant legal risk to the entire family. We need to handle this professionally." "A legal risk," Sebastian replied incredulously. "You're talking about my mother as if she were a business threat. I'm talking about a person who is making statements that could damage the reputation of our family and our company," Rodrigo replied. "Statements that need to be evaluated carefully by professionals." Milagros approached the intercom, and before Sebastian could stop her, she pressed the button. Her voice, clear and firm, despite her fear, filled the air. "I haven't come to make claims," she said simply. "I've come to reunite with my son." The silence that followed was so deep that you could hear the heartbeat of every person present. Several seconds passed before Rodrigo's voice returned, but when it did, it had lost all pretense of professionalism. Elena muttered, and in that single word there were decades of contained anger. "Did you really think you could come back after all these years and act as if nothing had happened?" "I didn't come to act as if nothing had happened," Milagros replied, her voice gaining strength with every word. "I came because my son found me. Because after 27 years of pain, fate decided to give us a second chance." "Second chance," Rodrigo's laughter sounded genuinely bitter. "Elena, you signed documents. You legally renounced all your rights as a mother. You accepted financial compensation in exchange for disappearing from our lives." This revelation hit Sebastian like a bolt of lightning. What documents? What is she talking about? Milagros closed her eyes as if she had been dreading this moment for decades. "Sebastian, there are things about that night that I haven't told you yet." "What things?" Sebastian asked. Although he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer, Rodrigo's voice came again from the intercom, interrupting the moment. "Elena, tell our son the whole truth. Tell him about the money you accepted. Tell him about the documents you signed voluntarily." "It wasn't voluntary." Milagros screamed, years of pain and rage finally escaping. "You told me it was the only way to protect Sebastian. You told me that if I didn't sign, he would be sent away, where you could never find him." The silence that followed lasted almost a full minute. When Rodrigo spoke again, his voice had taken on a tone of false patience that was more disturbing than his previous anger. "Sebastian," he said, completely ignoring Milagros, "I need you to understand something important. Your mother was not an innocent victim in this situation. She made decisions, accepted compensation, and signed legal agreements that remain valid today." Sebastian looked at the two most important women in his life. Isidora's eyes were filled with tears, but her jaw was firm, ready to face whatever truth emerged. Milagros, despite her obvious pain, had found a reserve of courage that had been buried for decades. "You know what, Dad?" Sebastian replied. His voice was calmer than it had been all afternoon. "I don't care about the documents. I don't care about the legal agreements. The only thing that matters to me is that for 27 years you lied to me about my mother's death. I protected you from a complex situation that you couldn't have understood as a child." "She was my mother," Sebastian exploded. "It was my decision too. How dare you make that decision for me?" The pause that followed was long and tense. Clearly, Rodrigo had not expected his son to react with such emotional force. "You're making a mistake, Sebastian," came the reply at last. "A mistake that will have legal and financial consequences you can't imagine." "The only consequences I'm concerned about are emotional," Sebastian replied firmly, "and I'm already facing those." At that moment, they heard multiple voices from the hallway. Rodrigo's lawyers were discussing strategies, talking about binding documents and legal precedents. "Isadora," Sebastian said urgently, "call my personal lawyer and also call that private investigator I hired last year for another case." What for? Asked Isadora, already looking for the numbers on her phone. Because if my father wants to do this legally and professionally, then we're going to do it completely legally and professionally. I want all the documents my mother supposedly signed to be investigated. I want to know exactly what agreements were made and under what circumstances. Milagros approached Sebastian and took his hands. Son, she said softly, the documents I signed under extreme emotional pressure. Your father convinced me that it was the only way to protect you. But now that I'm older, that I've had years to think about it, I realize that there were probably other options. What kind of pressure? Sebastian asked. He told me that if I didn't accept his terms, he would use his influence to make sure I could never get a job, that I could never rent an apartment, that I would basically become an invisible person to society. Sebastian felt anger rising in his chest, but this time it was a cold, calculated anger. That's called coercion, and contracts signed under coercion can be invalidated. Rodrigo's voice came again from outside, and this time there was a note of genuine concern in it. Sebastian, don't turn this into a legal battle. No one is going to win if this becomes public. Think about your company, your reputation, your future with Isadora. Are you threatening Isadora too now? Sebastian asked, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm pointing out realities. Family scandals have a way of affecting everyone involved. At that moment, Isadora finished her calls and approached Sebastian. Your lawyer is on his way, and the investigator says he can be here in an hour. Perfect, said Sebastian, then shouted into the intercom. Dad, if you want to do this with lawyers, fine. But they're going to be my lawyers too, and we're going to go over every document, every agreement, every detail of what happened 27 years ago. The sound of urgent conversations intensified from outside. Clearly, Rodrigo's legal team had not expected Sebastian to be so prepared for a legal battle. Sebastian, Rodrigo's voice had lost much of its previous confidence. Can we talk in private? Just you and me, no lawyers, no hearings. No, Sebastian replied firmly. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my mother and in front of Isadora. There are no more secrets in this family. Another long silence. Seb could imagine his father making quick calculations, weighing options, trying to find a way to control a situation that was clearly slipping out of his hands. All right, the voice finally came, and for the first time in the entire conversation, there was a note of defeat in it. But I want you to understand, Sebastian, that once we open this Pandora's box, there will be no way to close it. There are truths about your mother, about me, about our family that will change the way you see everything. Nothing can change the way I see things anymore, Sebastian replied, because for 27 years I've been seeing lies. For the first time in my life, I'm ready to see the truth, no matter how painful it is. All right, Rodrigo sighed. My lawyers are preparing the original documents. When your legal representatives arrive, we can review everything. But Sebastian, what? When you know the whole truth, I hope you can forgive the decisions I made, because everything I did believing it was best for you. That's right, said Sebastian, looking at his mother with love and isolating her with gratitude. That's something we'll find out very soon. The true revelation of the family secrets was about to begin, and everyone knew that when it was over, the Montemayor family would never be the same again. 2 hours later, Sebastian's living room had been transformed into a makeshift legal office. Documents were scattered across the marble coffee table. 3 lawyers pored over each page, and the private investigator had arrived with a folder full of information he had gathered years ago during his initial search for Elena Montemayor. But most surprising of all was the gradual change in the atmosphere. What had begun as a hostile confrontation was evolving into something completely unexpected, a real opportunity for family healing. Rodrigo Montemayor had finally entered the house, but he was not the intimidating, controlling man Sebastian had expected to face. Instead, he was a 65-year-old man who looked more fragile than Sebastian remembered, with gray hair he hadn't noticed before, and a posture that spoke of years of emotional baggage he had been carrying in silence. The documents confirm what Miracles said, announced Sebastian's lawyer, Dr. Ricardo Valdez, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the pages. These contracts were signed under what is legally considered duress, emotional coercion. Furthermore, several of the terms are so disproportionate that a modern judge would consider them unconstitutional. Rodrigo, who had been sitting in silence for the last hour, finally looked up. I suppose that means they have no legal validity. Correct, confirmed Dr. Valdez. But more importantly, Mr. Montemayor, these documents reveal that you knew you were separating a mother from her minor son without valid legal justification. Sebastian looked at his father, expecting to see anger or defensiveness. Instead, he saw something he had never seen before in the eyes of Rodrigo Montemayor. Tears, Dad, Sebastian whispered, confused by this display of vulnerability. Rodrigo covered his face with his hands, and when he spoke, his voice was broken. Sebastian, I have carried the weight of this decision for 27 years. Every Christmas, every birthday of yours, every achievement we celebrated together. I knew someone was missing who should have been there. Miracles, who had been watching silently from the sofa, straightened slightly. Rodrigo, are you saying you regret it? The man who had been the tyrant of her nightmares for decades turned toward her, and Miracles could see something in his eyes she had never expected to see. Genuine pain, Elena said softly, using his real name for the first time in the conversation. I regret many things, but mainly I regret allowing my pride and my need for control destroy our family. Isadora, who had been silently taking notes in her notebook, approached Sebastian and took his hand. She could feel the confusion and conflicting emotions he was experiencing. For 27 years, she had built an image of her father based on the limited information she had. Now that image was crumbling and rebuilding in real time. Why, Dad? Sebastian asked, his voice softer than it had been all afternoon. If you knew it was wrong, why did you do it? Rodrigo stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the garden where Sebastian had played as a child. Because I was young, arrogant, and terribly insecure, he admitted. When I married your mother, she was smarter than me, more compassionate than me, more loved by everyone who knew her. And I, instead of feeling proud to have such an incredible wife, felt intimidated. Elena Milagros put a hand to her heart. Intimidated by me, by your kindness. Rodrigo turned to her. I saw how you cared for your sister and her children, how you always put the needs of others before your own, how you were loved by all our employees because you treated them with genuine respect. And I knew that if you ever had to choose between your family of origin and me, you would choose what was right, not what was convenient. The revelation fell over the room like a heavy blanket. Sebastian began to understand that his parents' separation had not been just about money or control, but about the deep insecurities of a man who did not feel worthy of the love he had received. So when you found out that Mom was helping her sister, Sebastian said slowly, you weren't angry about the money. You got angry because it confirmed your worst fears about yourself. Rodrigo nodded, tears running freely down his cheeks. Now it confirmed that I was exactly the kind of man who would allow children to go hungry to protect his bank account. And instead of changing, instead of trying to be better, I decided to punish the person who had shown me the truth about myself. Milagros stood up slowly as if waking up from a very long dream. For 27 years, she had lived with anger towards this man, but looking at him now, seeing his genuine pain and real remorse, she felt something she had never expected to feel. Compassion, Rodrigo said softly. What would have happened if we had talked? If you had told me that you felt insecure instead of threatening me, I probably would have tried to help you be a better person, Rodrigo replied with a sad smile. You probably would have been patient with me. You would have shown me how to change gradually, and I was too proud to admit that I needed that kind of help. The private investigator, who had been watching this exchange with professional fascination, cleared his throat. Mr. Montemayor, there is something else I think you should know. Everyone turned toward him. During my initial investigations a few years ago, I discovered that you have been making anonymous donations to charities that help low-income families, specifically organizations that help single mothers and children in difficult situations. Sebastian frowned. Anonymous donations. How much money? Over the past 10 years, approximately $8 million, the investigator replied. And before that, there were regular transfers to an account belonging to your mother's sister. Milagros gasped. What? You've been helping my sister all these years? Rodrigo looked as if he had been discovered in his deepest secret. I couldn't undo what had been done to you, he murmured. But I thought maybe I could make sure your family never again went through what drove them to ask you for help in the first place. What about the donations to other organizations? Asked Isadora, clearly moved by this revelation. Every year on Elena's birthday, on Mother's Day, at Christmas, I donated money thinking of her, thinking of all the mothers who might be separated from their children. It was my way of, I don't know, trying to make amends. It was my way of, I don't know, trying to make amends. The room fell into a deep emotional silence. Sebastian realized that he had been living with an incomplete version of the truth for decades. His father was not the heartless monster he had imagined, but a deeply wounded man who had made based on his own insecurities and had been trying to make up for them in silence for years. Dad, Sebastian said finally, why didn't you ever tell me about the donations? Why didn't you ever tell me you regretted it? Because I thought it was too late, Rodrigo replied. I thought you had grown up happy believing that your mother had died and that bringing up the truth would only cause you unnecessary pain. And why? Because I was afraid that when you knew the truth, you would hate me so much that I would lose the only piece of family I had left. Isadora wiped away the tears that had begun to form in her eyes. Mr. Montemayor, may I ask you a personal question? Rodrigo, he nodded. In all these years, he never thought about seeking professional help, therapy, counseling, something to help him process these feelings. Rodrigo laughed bitterly. Isadora, I belong to a generation of men who were raised to believe that admitting emotional weakness was the worst thing you could do. But you're right, I should have sought help. I should have done many things differently. Milagros approached Rodrigo slowly, and when she was in front of him, she did something that surprised everyone in the room. She extended her hand toward him. Rodrigo said softly, I've spent 27 years hating you, 27 years blaming you for all the pain in my life. But now I realize that you have also been suffering all these years. Rodrigo looked at her outstretched hand as if it were a miracle. Elena, you don't have to forgive me. What I did was unforgivable. I'm not forgiving you for you, Milagros replied firmly. I am forgiving you for me and for our son, because I have learned that carrying anger for decades only hurts me. When Rodrigo took her hand, it was as if an electric current of healing passed between them. It wasn't romance. Those feelings had died long ago, but it was something equally powerful, the possibility of peace. Sebastian watched his parents, and for the first time in his life, he saw them not as the larger-than-life figures they had been in his childhood, but as complex human beings who had made mistakes and were trying to find a way to live with the consequences. What do we do now? Sebastian asked. Rodrigo turned to his son, still holding his miracle hand. Now we try to be a family again, not the family we were before. That family is lost forever. But maybe we can build something new, something better. A family that includes Isadora, Sebastian asked, taking his girlfriend's hand. A family that includes anyone who loves my son as much as it's obvious that Isadora loves him. Rodrigo replied, smiling for the first time all afternoon. Isadora approached the group, feeling included in this moment of family reconciliation. Mr. Montemayor, Mrs. Milagros, I want you to know that I am honored to witness this moment, and I want you to know that Sebastian and I want both of you to be part of our future. Our future? Asked Milagros, noticing something special in the way Isadora had said those words. Sebastian looked at Isadora, then at his parents, and realized that this was the perfect moment for the surprise he had been planning for weeks. Well, he said, taking a small velvet box out of his pocket, I hoped this moment would come under different circumstances, but I think now is perfect. He knelt in front of Isadora. She covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes filling with tears of joy. Isadora, Sebastian began, you have been my partner, my best friend, and the person who helped me find my mother. I can't imagine facing the future without you by my side. Will you marry me? Yes, Isadora shouted without hesitating for a second, throwing herself into his arms while Milagros and Rodrigo applauded, united in their joy for their son. As Sebastian slipped the ring onto Isadora's finger, Milagro turned to Rodrigo. Do you know what this means? It means we're going to plan a wedding together. He smiled like the parents we should always have been. And for the first time in 27 years, Rodrigo Montemayor smiled genuinely, knowing that he had found not only forgiveness, but a second chance to be the father and man he should always have been. The healing had begun, and with it the promise of a future filled with true love and a family reunited. 3 months after the day that changed their lives forever, Sebastian's mansion had undergone a complete transformation. What had once been an elegant but cold home now radiated warmth and family life. The walls that once displayed expensive but soulless art now displayed family photographs. Sebastian and Milagros cooking together. Isadora teaching Rodrigo how to use social media. The four of them sharing Sunday dinners filled with laughter. Room that had changed the most was the one that had once been Sebastian's formal study. It had now been converted into what Milagros affectionately called the Family Operations Center, a shared office where she worked on her new projects. Isadora planned her wedding, and Rodrigo had set up a small desk from where he managed his new charitable initiatives. "Can you believe that months ago we didn't even know we existed?" Milagros asked on that sunny Saturday morning as she prepared the special breakfast that had become a family tradition. Her hands, which had once trembled with nervousness and uncertainty, now moved confidently as she prepared the stuffed arepas she remembered from her childhood. Sebastian, who was helping her cut fruit, smiled when he saw how his mother had blossomed in recent months. The physical change was noticeable. She had gained a healthy amount of weight. Her hair had regained its shine and life, and most importantly, her eyes sparkled with a joy that he had learned to appreciate every day. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a dream," admitted Sebastian, stealing a piece of mango and earning a playful slap on the hand from his mother. "A dream where I have not only my mother back, but where my father has become someone I truly admire." From the living room came the sound of laughter. Rodrigo and Isadora were reviewing the wedding invitations, and apparently the future father-in-law had made a comment that had made his daughter-in-law laugh out loud. The relationship between them had been one of the most beautiful surprises of this whole experience. Rodrigo, who for years had been a reserved and formal man, had found in Isadora the daughter he had never had, while she had found in him the understanding father she had lost when she was young. "Look at this," said Isadora as she entered the kitchen with a radiant smile and an envelope in her hand. The confirmation from the church had arrived. "We officially have San Miguel Cathedral reserved for the ceremony." Milagros stopped what she was doing and hugged Isadora. "Oh, my girl, it's going to be the most beautiful wedding this city has ever seen." The wedding planning had been a family project in which everyone had participated enthusiastically. Rodrigo had insisted on paying for all the expenses as a wedding gift, but more importantly, he had been actively involved in every decision. Milagros had taken on the role of emotional coordinator, making sure that every detail reflected the love and personality of the couple. And Sebastian had discovered that planning his wedding with the full support of both parents was an experience he had never imagined possible. "So, what news do we have about the dress?" asked Sebastian, although he pretended not to be interested as he continued cutting fruit. "Oh no," laughed Isadora. "That information is classified until the day of the wedding. Not even your mother knows what I look like in it." "That's right," confirmed Milagros with a knowing smile. "Isadora wants it to be a complete surprise for everyone. All I know is that when Sebastian sees her walking down the aisle, he'll probably faint from emotion." Rodrigo entered the kitchen at that moment, carrying with him an energy that radiated deep satisfaction. In the last 3 months, he had experienced his own remarkable transformation. The man who had once been known for his business coldness now smiled constantly, spoke openly about his feelings, and had found real purpose in his new philanthropic projects. "Family," he announced with a smile that he had learned to show without reservation. "I have extraordinary news." Everyone gathered around him, intrigued by his expression of contained emotion. "Remember the foundation we established last month? The Elena Milagros Foundation for Family Reunification?" Milagros placed a hand over her heart. He still got emotional every time he heard the name they had chosen for the organization. It was a combination of his real name and the name he had adopted during his years of survival. "Of course," Sebastian replied. "What happened?" "We just received our first official request for help," Rodrigo said, his eyes shining with tears of joy. "A mother in Colombia who lost contact with her daughter 15 years ago due to desperate economic circumstances, and thanks to our resources and contacts, we believe we can reunite them before Christmas." The silence that followed was one of pure amazement. The idea that their personal story could become hope for other separated families was something that moved them all deeply. A real reunion? Milagros asked, her voice broken with emotion. Like ours? Exactly like ours, Rodrigo confirmed. And there are more requests coming in every day. Apparently, our story has spread further than we thought, and families from all over Latin America are asking for help. Isidora approached Sebastian and took his hand. Do you realize what this means? Your story with your mother not only changed your life, it's changing the lives of families across the continent. Sebastian felt a wave of emotion so intense that he had to sit down. All his life he had searched for a purpose beyond financial success, and now, through his reunion with his mother, he had found a mission that gave real meaning to all his work and resources. Is there anything else? Rodrigo continued, clearly enjoying being the bearer of good news. The local university has been in touch with me. They want to offer Milagros, a position as a visiting professor in the classical languages department. Milagros gasped, bringing both hands to her face. What? Seriously, completely serious, smiled Rodrigo. Apparently, when your story became public, several renowned academics confirmed your professional reputation from years ago. The university wants you not only to teach, but also to direct a new program in international studies. Mom, Sebastian exclaimed, hugging her tightly, you're going to be the brilliant academic you always were. Milagros began to cry, but they were tears of joy so pure that they infected everyone in the kitchen. I can't believe it, she murmured, after so many years of feeling that my education had been wasted, of feeling that all my knowledge was worthless. Your knowledge always served you well, Isidore interrupted Isidora gently. They just needed the right moment to shine again. The morning continued with more surprises. Sebastian had been working secretly on a special project for Milagros and decided that it was the perfect moment to reveal it. Mom, he said, pulling a thick envelope from one of the kitchen drawers. There's something I've been preparing for you. Milagros opened the envelope curiously and took out a set of official documents. As she read them, her expression changed from confusion to utter amazement. Sebastian, she murmured, what is this? They're the deeds to a house, Sebastian explained, barely containing his emotion. A beautiful house in the neighborhood where you grew up, near where your sister lives. A house that is completely yours, no mortgage, no strings attached. My own house. Milagros sat down slowly, overwhelmed by the generosity of the gesture. Your own house, Sebastian confirmed, so you can have your own space. Your independence, but also so you can be close to the family you were never able to help properly before. Rodrigo approached and placed a hand on Milagros' shoulder. Elena, I want you to know that this house also has my complete blessing, and I want you to know that my intention is not to replace the home you lost, but to give you the opportunity to create a new one. Milagros looked at the three faces surrounding her with love and realized that she had gone from having nothing to having an abundance of blessings she had never dreamed possible. There's one condition, added Sebastian with a mischievous smile. What's that? Asked Milagros, wiping away her tears. That you let me live with you for the 2 weeks before the wedding. I want to experience what it's like to live with my mother before I become a husband. The laughter that followed was so genuine and full of joy that it seemed to fill the entire house. Of course, exclaimed Milagros, but I warn you, I'm going to spoil you like the child I never got to spoil. That's exactly the idea, replied Sebastian, hugging her. Isidora watched this scene with her heart full of love and gratitude. In the last few months, she had witnessed the most beautiful transformation she had ever seen, the healing of a family that had been broken for decades. But more than that, she had seen how genuine love could overcome any obstacle, any pain from the past. You know what? Said Isidora suddenly. I think we need to celebrate all this properly. What do you have in mind? Asked Rodrigo. A family trip, the four of us, to Spain, so that Milagros can show Sebastian the places where she studied, where she was happy before everything changed. Milagros was speechless for a moment. The idea of returning to Spain, but this time with her son and her future daughter-in-law, accompanied by the man who had once been her husband but was now her friend, was something she had never imagined possible. Would you really do that for me? She asked in a small voice. We wouldn't do it for you, Sebastian corrected her. We would do it with you because we are a family, and families create beautiful memories together. Rodrigo nodded emphatically. Besides, I think we all need to see the places that shape the extraordinary woman you are. I want to better understand who you were before me, before I made my mistakes. The conversation continued for hours, planning not only the trip to Spain, but also ideas for expanding the foundation, plans for Milagros's new academic career, and final details for the wedding that was fast approaching. When they finally sat down to breakfast, Sebastian looked around the table and realized that he had found something he had been searching for his entire life without knowing it. Completeness. Can I make a toast? He asked, raising his cup of coffee. Everyone raised their drinks. For second chances, Sebastian began, his voice filled with emotion, for the power of forgiveness, for the love that can overcome any obstacle, and for the family I thought I had lost forever, but which turns out was just waiting for the right moment to come together. For mothers who never stop loving, added Milagros. For fathers who learn to be better, contributed Rodrigo. And for the true love that makes everything worthwhile, concluded Isadora. As they clinked their cups in a toast full of joy, none of them could have imagined that in just a few weeks, their story of reunion and family healing would become an inspiration to thousands of people around the world. But at that moment, sitting around the breakfast table, surrounded by love and laughter, all that mattered was the perfect present they had built together. The future stretched out before them, full of promise. A beautiful wedding, new family projects, lives to save through their foundation, and an eternity of moments like this one to make up for all the years lost. Because in the end, they had learned that true love knows no time limits, that families can be healed no matter how deep the wounds, and that sometimes the most beautiful endings come after the most painful beginnings. Life had given them a second chance, and they were determined to make it perfect. The wedding day dawned with a perfect blue sky, as if the universe itself had decided to conspire to create the most beautiful moment in the lives of Sebastian and Isadora's life. The San Miguel Cathedral had never looked more splendid, decorated with thousands of white and gold flowers that created a fairy tale atmosphere. But the real magic wasn't in the expensive decorations or elaborate arrangements. It was in the radiant faces of a family that had found its way back to love after decades of separation. In the cathedral's bridal chamber, Milagros helped Isadora with the final details of her dress, her hands trembling slightly with pure emotion. For the past 6 months, she had dreamed of this moment, of being present at her son's wedding, of fulfilling the role of mother that she had lost for so many years. You look absolutely radiant, my girl, Milagros whispered, delicately adjusting the lace veil that had belonged to Isadora's grandmother. Sastian is going to be breathless when he sees you. Isadora looked at herself in the mirror and smiled, but her eyes filled with tears of happiness. Mrs. Milagros, I can't believe this day has finally come, and I can't believe you're here to experience it with me. Mrs. Milagros, laughed the woman who had regained her identity and her place in the world. Today and always, I am your mother, Elena, and being here with you, helping you get ready to marry my son, is one of the greatest gifts life has given me. At that moment, the door opened gently and Doña Carmen entered, who had become an additional mother figure for the entire family. At 72 years old, she had insisted on being part of the team that would help Isadora get ready. "Oh my God!" exclaimed Doña Carmen, putting her hands to her heart. "Isadora, you look like a real princess." The three women embraced, representing different generations united by their love for Sebastian and for this new family that had risen from the ashes of pain. "Are the men ready?" asked Isadora, trying to control her bridal nerves. "Sebastian has been ready since 5 in the morning," laughed Elena. "I found him in the kitchen at that time, fully dressed, practicing his vows in front of the mirror. And Mr. Rodrigo is more nervous than the groom," admitted Doña Carmen with a smile. "He keeps going over his speech as the groom's father. I think he's rewritten his words at least 10 times. Meanwhile, in the adjacent room, Sebastian adjusted his tie for the 10th time, his hands trembling slightly with emotion. His father was sitting in a chair nearby, watching him with an expression of pride and love that he had learned to show openly in recent months. "Son," Rodrigo said softly, "are you nervous?" "Completely," Sebastian admitted with a smile. "But it's the good kind of nervous, the kind that comes when you're about to start the best part of your life. Rodrigo stood up and walked over to his son. Sebastian, there's something I want to tell you before we walk down the aisle. What is it, Dad? I want you to know that watching you become the man you are today, seeing you find true love with Isadora, and especially seeing you reunited with your mother, all of that has been the most beautiful experience of my life. Sebastian felt tears forming in his eyes. Dad, let me finish, Rodrigo continued, his own voice breaking with emotion. For years, I thought that being a good father meant protecting you from the truth, controlling every aspect of your life. But now I understand that being a good father means supporting you as you build your own life, your own family, your own dreams. You've been a good father, Sebastian replied firmly. No perfect, but none of us is perfect. The important thing is that you found a way to be better, and that's all that matters. Father and son embraced, a hug that symbolized not only the love between them, but the complete healing of decades of misunderstanding and pain. A soft knock on the door interrupted them. It was the wedding coordinator. Gentlemen, it's time. The ceremony is about to begin. When Sebastian and Rodrigo left the room, they ran into Elena, who had come to give her son one last hug before the ceremony. She was wearing an elegant navy blue dress that made her look radiant, and she had a smile that she hadn't lost since she had regained her place in the family. My beautiful boy, Elena whispered, taking Sebastian's hands in hers. Are you ready for this important step? Ready as ever, Mom, Sebastian replied. And every time he said that word, he felt as if a part of his soul that had been broken for decades was healing. Eudora is an extraordinary woman, Elena continued. You're going to be very happy with her. I know. And Mom, yes, thank you for coming back into my life. Thank you for waiting all these years. Thank you for allowing me to finally get to know the incredible mother you always were. Elena began to cry, but she quickly controlled herself so as not to ruin her makeup. Sebastian, my love, you don't have to thank me for loving my son. That's the most natural thing in the world. The music began to play from inside the cathedral, signaling that it was time for the procession to begin. Rodrigo offered his arm to Elena, a gesture that symbolized that even though they were no longer husband and wife, they would always be family. Ready to walk down the aisle together? Rodrigo asked. Ready, Elena replied with a radiant smile. As they walked toward the entrance of the cathedral, Sebastian stood alone for a moment, processing the magnitude of the moment. In a few minutes, he would be marrying the woman of his dreams, surrounded by both sets of parents, in a ceremony that 6 months ago would have been completely impossible to imagine. The cathedral was filled with family, friends, and colleagues, but Sebastian knew that the only people who really mattered were there: Elena, Rodrigo, and Isadora. His entire family finally reunited for the most important day of his life. When the music changed to the wedding march and the doors of the cathedral opened to reveal Isadora walking toward him on the arm of her own father, Sebastian felt his heart could burst with joy. She was absolutely perfect. Her lace dress flowed like a cloud of dreams. Her smile was brighter than all the candles in the cathedral combined, and in her eyes he could see the reflection of all the happiness he felt in his own heart. But what made this moment truly perfect was not just seeing his bride walking toward him, it was being able to turn his head slightly and see Elena in the front row, with tears of happiness running down her cheeks, living the moment she had dreamed of for 27 years. It was seeing Rodrigo at her side with an expression of paternal pride that radiated genuine love. When Isadora reached the altar and her father officially gave her away to Sebastian, the moment was so emotional that even some of the guests began to cry with emotion. You look beautiful, Sebastian whispered, taking Isadora's hands in his. We're perfect, Isadora replied, and in those two words was included all the family that surrounded them with love. The priest began the ceremony with words about love, family, and the miracles that happen when people open themselves up to the possibilities of forgiveness and second chances. As he listened to the sacred words, Sebastian couldn't help but think about the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. It had begun with a simple walk through the center of the city. It had continued with the shock of discovering that his mother was alive, had gone through moments of pain and confrontation, and had culminated in this perfect celebration of love and family reunited. When the time came to exchange vows, Sebastian and Isadora had decided to write their own words. But what no one expected was that they had both included Elena and Rodrigo in their promises. Isadora, Sebastian began, his voice clear and firm, I promise to love you, respect you, and care for you every day of my life. But I also promise that we will always honor the family that has brought us here. I promise that we will build a home filled with the same love, forgiveness, and second chances that we have experienced these past few months. Isadora's response was equally emotional. Sebastian, I promise to be your wife, your companion, and your best friend. And I promise to love and honor the extraordinary family that is now also my family. I promise that we will always remember that miracles are possible when we open our hearts to love. When the priest finally declared them husband and wife, and Sebastian kissed Isadora as his wife, the cathedral erupted in applause and tears of joy. But the most beautiful moment came immediately after, when the new couple walked straight toward Elena and Rodrigo to embrace them as a complete family for the first time in public. The photograph of that family embrace, Sebastian and Isadora in the center, Elena and Rodrigo on either side, all beaming with happiness, would become the image that would define not only their wedding, but the transformative power of family love. The wedding reception was held in the gardens of Sebastian's mansion, which had been transformed into a paradise of golden lights and fragrant flowers. Fragrant flowers. But more beautiful than any decoration was the atmosphere of pure joy that radiated from every corner where the family was gathered together. Elena had insisted on giving the first speech of the evening, and when she stood up with a glass of champagne in her hand, the entire reception fell into an expectant silence. Her eyes glistened with tears of happiness as she looked at her son and her new daughter-in-law. 6 months ago, she began in a clear and unemotional voice. I was a woman who had lost all hope. I thought my life had ended long ago, that my purpose in this world had disappeared along with the opportunity to be a mother. The crowd listened in absolute silence, many already knowing the extraordinary story of this family. But my son, Elena continued, looking directly at Sebastian. My son taught me that it's never too late for miracles. He taught me that true love can overcome any obstacle, any lost time, any pain from the past. Sebastian wiped away the tears that had begun to roll down his cheeks, holding Isadora's hand tightly. And Isadora, Elena turned towards her daughter-in-law. You were the person who made this miracle possible. It was you who saw me that day on the street and had the courage to tell Sebastian what you had seen. Without your observation, without your bravery, this family would never have been reunited. Isadora covered her mouth with emotion, vividly remembering that moment that had changed all their lives. So today, Elena raised her glass higher. We are not only celebrating the union of two extraordinary people in marriage, we are celebrating the power of destiny, the power of family love, and the power of second chances that God gives us when we least expect them. For Sebastian and Isadora, Elena shouted, and the entire reception erupted in applause and cheers of joy. When it was Rodrigo's turn, he approached the microphone with an expression of humility and gratitude that he had learned to show during these months of personal transformation. Friends and family, he began. For most of my life, I measured success by the wrong things. By money accumulated, by power acquired, by respect based on fear. He paused and looked directly at Elena. But these last few months have taught me that true wealth is not counted in numbers in a bank account. It is counted in shared hugs, in laughter around a family table, in the opportunity to see your son become a better man than you ever were. Elena smiled at him with forgiveness and understanding, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by anyone at the reception. Sebastian Rodrigo addressed his son directly. I deeply regret the years we lost because of my mistakes, but I am infinitely grateful for the opportunity you have given me to be part of your happiness, to meet Isadora, and to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty and real love. I love you, Dad, Sebastian replied from his table, his voice heavy with emotion. And I love you, son, and I promise to spend the rest of my life being the father I always should have been. The evening continued with dancing, laughter, and celebrations that lasted into the wee hours. But the most emotional moment came when the band played a special song that Sebastian had chosen specifically to dance with his mother. As mother and son moved slowly across the dance floor, Elena whispered in Sebastian's ear, Do you know what the most beautiful thing about all this is? What, Mom? That we're not trying to make up for lost time. We're creating new time. We're building new memories. We're being a family in the present, not living in the past. Sebastian hugged her tighter. You're right, and we have a whole life ahead of us to create more moments like this. When the song ended, Isadora joined them on the dance floor, followed by Rodrigo. And for the first time in 27 years, the four of them danced together as the complete family they had finally managed to become. The surprises of the night were not over. Sebastian had prepared a special video that was shown during dinner, showing the work of the Elena Milagros Foundation over the last few months. The images showed families who had been reunited thanks to his story, children who had found their parents, mothers who had been reunited with their children. To date, Sebastian announced as the video played, our foundation has reunited 14 families in 6 different countries, and this is just the beginning. The audience rose to a spontaneous standing ovation, recognizing that they were witnessing not just a wedding, but the birth of a legacy that would change lives for generations to come. Around midnight, when most of the guests had left, the family sat around a table in the garden under the stars, sharing the last moments of this perfect day. You know what? Said Isadora, taking off her shoes and leaning against Sebastian's shoulder. I think this is the most perfect day I've ever had, even more perfect than the day you met Sebastian, Elena asked with a mischievous smile. Even more perfect, Isadora confirmed, because today I not only married the man of my dreams, today I gained a whole family that loves and accepts me as if I had been part of it all my life. Rodrigo cleared his throat. Family, there is something else I want to share with you on this special night. Everyone turned toward him, intrigued. I have been working with my lawyers over the last few weeks and have decided to change my will, he announced. Half of my estate will go directly to the Elena Milagros Foundation. I want